Courageous. What exactly does it mean to be courageous? It can be interpreted in many different ways. The Oxford Dictionary defines courageous as the ability to do something dangerous or to face pain or opposition without showing fear. I personally would describe it as stepping out of your comfort zone and risking something to better yourself, others, or the world. So, according to these definitions, everyone is technically courageous, whether it is because you went out of your way to protest about something you care about, volunteer to go to war, or move across the country in order to better you or your family's life. But, like with everything, there is a scale to being courageous, whether it is how often you are being courageous or the overall impact and significance of your courageousness. It is what stands you out from others and causes you to be remembered and revered. Dr. Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Emmeline Pankhurst, Malala Yousafzai, and Ruby Bridges. What do all these people have in common? They all took very courageous actions that not only affected them and their families, but influenced, helped, and affected people all over the world in positive ways, often with the risk of death or major consequences that the average person would never consider. Looking back on the time period of the 1900s to 1940s, there are lots of very important people I could have chosen to talk about because there were so many courageous people during this time, especially compared to now. But it had to be like that. So much stuff was going on back then. There was two world wars, the back end of slavery, and the beginning of the civil rights movement was during this time, and not to mention the Great Depression. And this is just talking about America too. So imagine how many people there is to choose from. But the person I chose to focus on, who I thought was very courageous and didn't get a lot of credit, was Witold Pilecki. To most people, this name is most likely unfamiliar, but let me tell you, he is a very inspirational human being. Being born May 13, 1901 in Poland, he participated in the Polish-Soviet War, which ended in 1921, and also participated in the unsuccessful defense of Poland from Germany. Shortly after, he co-founded the secret Polish army resistance. Pilecki then let himself get captured by the Germans, basically volunteering himself to go to Auschwitz concentration camp, which was probably the deadliest place on earth at the time. At Auschwitz, he organized a resistance movement that eventually included hundreds of inmates, and he secretly drew up reports detailing German atrocities at the camp, which were smuggled out to the Home Army headquarters and shared with the Western Allies, with Witold being one of the first people to sound the alarm of what was actually going on in these concentration camps. Witold Pilecki then escaped from Auschwitz and fought in the Warsaw Uprising, which was an operation he helped organize for the Polish to overturn Nazi rule. After the communist takeover of Poland after the Germans ruling, he remained loyal to the London-based Polish government in exile. In 1945, he returned to Poland to report to the government in exile on the situation in Poland, and wrote Witold's report, depicting his Auschwitz experience before returning because he expected to be killed when he came back by the new communist authorities. In 1947, he was arrested by the secret police on charges of working for foreign imperialism. After being subjected to torture and a show trial which he stood no chance of winning, Witold was executed in 1948. Witold Pilecki served for his country through and through for 30 years, doing things that should have killed him, trying to protect and serve his country at all costs while leaving behind his wife and two kids. Which is something many people in the Ukraine can relate to in present times, fighting for their country at all costs, even if it means leaving their family behind, while in 2022, almost 80 years later, by the same providence of Russia, which is crazy to think about. But focusing back on Witold Pilecki, his story was inconvenient to the Polish communist authorities at the time and was hidden and remained mostly unknown for several decades, until Polish historian Józef Garlinski gave light to the Witold and let his story be known to the world. Many depictions of Pilecki's story have been made, whether it is movies, articles, or books, and he is remembered throughout the world. I feel like Witold Pilecki embodied what it meant to be courageous, especially because of his impact. And I hope with me telling you this story, you think so too. Especially with everything going on in present times, which relates majorly because without people being courageous in Ukraine, with thousands leaving their families behind and fighting to protect their country at all costs in war, they would not be able to fend off the Russians the way they have been currently doing, which is exactly what Pilecki did too. I hope the story made you think about what it means to be courageous and how you can be more courageous throughout your life. And I would like to leave you with a quote. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Nelson Mandela.